Imagine a moonlit night in May 1943. While the world lay gripped by the terror of total war, a secret plan was unfolding in the shadows of the British RAF. The target was the Ruhr Valley, the industrial powerhouse that fueled the Nazi war machine. This wasn't just any mission, it was Operation Chastise. The goal was to destroy three massive dams, the Möhne, the Eder, and the Sorp. These structures weren't just concrete, they were the arteries of the German economy, providing water for steel production and electricity for the factories churning out tanks and planes. For years, the British had known that hitting these dams would be a fatal blow to Hitler's industry, but they were deemed indestructible. They were protected by heavy anti-aircraft guns, torpedo nets, and natural terrain that made traditional bombing impossible. The Germans slept soundly, believing their water supplies were beyond the reach of any Allied bomber. But little did they know that a group of men were about to attempt the unthinkable. Led by the young and daring Wing Commander Guy Gibson, the 617 Squadron was being formed for a mission so dangerous it was almost a suicide run. The atmosphere was thick with tension and mystery. The men didn't even know what they were training for, only that they had to fly at altitudes so low they could see the grass on the hills. This was the beginning of the legend of the Dambusters, a story of innovation, courage, and a weapon that shouldn't have worked, but did. The story of the Dambusters doesn't start in a high-tech laboratory, but in a back garden. Dr. Barnes Wallis, a visionary British engineer, was obsessed with a problem. How do you destroy a dam protected by torpedo nets? If you drop a bomb from high up, you'll miss. If you fire a torpedo, the nets stop it. Wallis's solution was inspired by something as simple as skipping stones across a pond. He began experimenting with marbles and a water tub in his backyard, studying how an object could skip across the surface of the water if thrown with the right speed and angle. His peers thought he was eccentric, perhaps even mad, but Wallis was on to a breakthrough. He realized that a cylinder-shaped bomb, if spun backwards at a high rate, would not only skip over the water like a stone, but would actually crawl down the face of a dam when it hit it. This backspin was the key. It would bypass the torpedo nets and explode at the very base of the structure, where the water pressure was highest, causing a catastrophic collapse. However, the technical requirements were terrifying. The bomb, codenamed Upkeep, had to be dropped from exactly 60 feet above the water. A few feet too high and it would shatter. A few feet too low and the plane would crash. It was a scientific gamble that would require precision never before seen in the history of aerial warfare. Perfecting the technique for Operation Chastise was a nightmare of engineering and logistics. The RAF had to find a way to measure 60 feet of altitude with absolute certainty, something current altimeters couldn't do at such low levels. The solution was as ingenious as the bomb itself. Two spotlights were mounted on the aircraft, one in the nose and one in the tail, aimed at a specific angle so their beams would converge on the water's surface exactly when the plane was at 60 feet. The pilots would have to manually adjust their height until the two dots of light merged into one. But the challenges didn't stop there. The modified Avro Lancaster bombers had to be stripped of their mid-upper turrets to save weight and fitted with a special mechanism to spin the 9,000-pound drum-shaped bomb before release. The bombs needed to be dropped at a precise ground speed of 232 miles per hour. This wasn't just flying, it was a high-stakes ballet in the dark. Testing took place at Reculver in Kent, where crews watched as their prototypes broke apart or sank. The pressure was mounting. Time was running out before the water levels in the German reservoirs would start to drop, making the mission impossible for another year. Barnes Wallis and the RAF were pushing the limits of physics, and the men of the newly formed 617 Squadron were the ones who would have to execute this precarious dance over enemy territory. In March 1943, the elite 617 Squadron was officially born, initially known only as Squadron X. It was a diverse group of airmen from Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the United States, all led by the 24-year-old Wing Commander Guy Gibson. Gibson was already a veteran of over 170 missions, a man of incredible discipline and skill. He was given only 1 month to train his crew for a mission they didn't yet understand. Every night, the countryside of Britain echoed with the roar of 4-engine Lancasters flying just a few dozen feet above lakes and hills. The training was brutal and intensive. They practiced navigation at low levels, dodging simulated obstacles in total darkness. Gibson was the only one who knew the final targets, keeping the secret of the dams close to his chest until the very last moment. The men were chosen for their exceptional skill, but even they felt the weight of the mystery. Why were they flying so low? What were these strange spinning drums they were carrying? As the moon waxed full in mid-May, the tension reached a breaking point. On the night of May 16th, the briefing finally happened. The maps were revealed, the Möhne, the Eder, and the Sorp. The men were stunned by the audacity of the plan. They were going to fly into the heart of Germany, under the radar, and drop a skipping bomb into the face of a mountain of concrete. It was the night of Operation Chastise. The night of May 16, 1943 was clear and bright. At 9:28 p.m., the first wave of Lancasters roared off the runway. 19 aircraft carrying 133 men set out in 3 waves, flying as low as 100 feet across occupied Europe to avoid German radar. They were so low that one pilot later recalled seeing the faces of German soldiers on the ground as they zoomed past. The flight was a harrowing journey through flak and searchlights. Some planes hit power lines, others were shot down before they ever reached the Ruhr. When the first wave reached the Möhne Dam, the sight was intimidating. The dam was a curved wall of masonry, flanked by anti-aircraft towers that immediately opened fire. Gibson went in first. His bomb skipped perfectly but didn't breach the wall. He then stayed in the area, flying his plane back and forth to draw the enemy's fire away from the other Lancasters as they made their runs. It was a display of incredible bravery. One by one, the bombers attacked. The 4th bomb finally did it. A massive explosion sent a column of water hundreds of feet into the air. As the spray settled, a dark crack appeared in the dam. The crack widened, and suddenly the Möhne collapsed. A wall of 130 million tons of water began to surge down the valley, washing away everything in its path. The first part of the mission was a success, but the night was far from over. With the Möhne breached, Gibson led the remaining aircraft toward the Eder Dam. This target was even more difficult. The reservoir was surrounded by steep wooden hills, requiring the pilots to dive steeply and then level off at exactly 60 feet before pulling up sharply to avoid crashing into a mountain on the other side. It was a pilot's worst nightmare. After several failed attempts, the pilot Les Knight made his run. His bomb hit the wall and exploded. For a moment, there was silence. Then the Eder Dam gave way. Another torrent of water was unleashed, flooding the valley and destroying bridges and power stations for miles. Meanwhile, the 2nd and 3rd waves were attempting to hit the Sorpe Dam. The Sorpe was different. It was an earth-banked dam with a concrete core, which meant the bouncing bomb wouldn't work the same way. The pilots had to fly along the length of the dam and drop their bombs directly onto it. Despite several hits, the Sorpe remained standing, its core too strong for the explosives. By now, the German defenses were fully awake, and the return journey was a gauntlet of fire. The Lancasters were limping home, some with engines out, others riddled with bullet holes. The cost of the raid was beginning to manifest. Of the 19 planes that left, only 11 would return. The crews landed in the early morning light, exhausted and mourning their lost friends, waiting to hear the final count of the destruction they had wrought. The aftermath of Operation Chastise was a mixture of triumph and tragedy. On the ground in Germany, the destruction was immense. Nearly 1,300 people were killed in the resulting floods, many of them forced laborers. While the German industrial production was only temporarily halted, with the dams repaired within months, the psychological impact was profound. For the British people, the Dambusters were heroes who had proven that no part of the Third Reich was safe. Guy Gibson was awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest military decoration, and the 617 Squadron became a legendary unit of precision bombing. But the price of fame was high. 53 airmen had perished in one night, a loss that hit the survivors hard. Barnes Wallis was devastated by the death toll, weeping for the young men who had died, proving his theory correct. Yet the legacy of the Dambusters lived on. The raid forced the Germans to divert thousands of troops and resources to defend their infrastructure, taking them away from the front lines. It also pioneered the use of precision-guided weapons and specialized bombing techniques that would be used throughout the rest of the war. The story of the Dambusters remains one of the most incredible feats of military history, a testament to human ingenuity and the sheer will of men who were willing to fly through the gates of hell to change the world.